Welcome back. Since 2014, millions of Venezuelans have fled to neighboring countries because of economic hardship. Last year, the UN estimated that of the 200,000 who had crossed the border into Brazil, about 98,000 remain in that country, and as many as 500 continue to arrive each day. So what message did South America's largest economy have for its Lima Group allies today? Ernesta Araujo is Brazil's Minister of Foreign Affairs. Hi, Minister. Nice to see you. Thank you for coming in.
Great to be here.
I appreciate it. I want to pick up on some of the points that our Foreign Affairs Minister, Christopher Freeland, made, and especially wanted to ask you if you think that the threat of military intervention is real, and if you think that specifically coming from the U.S., that it is real. What are your impressions?
We're pretty sure that we can help Venezuelans find a way back to democracy through diplomatic means, through international pressure, to constructive pressure. So that's what we're working very hard on. This last month has shown, since the Lima Group meeting exactly 1 month ago, on 4th of January, that something that was considered impossible, which is to change the situation on the ground through diplomatic means, we're showing that that is possible. So we are pretty sure we can go forward all the way towards full redemocratization.
Can I ask you to dig a little deeper into that? Because I see what you're saying about how, 3 months ago, no one would have expected Juan Guaido to be interim president, and it's definitely, things are at a certain point.
Yes.
But when you talk about the next steps and essentially transitioning to power, what we can see from the outside is Nicolas Maduro digging in his heels. He does still have the support of the military. How realistic is it that a peaceful transition actually occurs? What will make that happen?
Yes, I would say that the support of the military is shaky. To Maduro, they don't seem to be total with Maduro in terms of repressing the population. That's not the case anymore. The repression is being done by the militias, not by the military. And there are some signs that they can one day, very soon, we hope, pledge loyalty to the interim legitimate government.
Do you really think that will happen, though? I know there are signs, and I know there's a split really between the top levels of the military and the lower levels, for sure, but do you really think there's enough of a sign that they might switch allegiance?
Yes, we do. That has to be worked, through more pressure, through the feeling that it's not tenable anymore, that the international community will not stand any other solution except for democracy through the Constitution. So the sort of international support is effective, we're pretty sure, and will be effective in helping changing that situation. They have a new interim government in power, which is more and more taking control of the loyalty of the citizenry, so this might happen, yes.
We mentioned off the top there that your country is kind of on the front lines of this crisis. A number of people from Venezuela have come into Brazil. Your president said in an interview with the Washington Post at Davos last week that Brazil has pretty much reached its limit in welcoming refugees. Can you translate that? Does that mean that you're not going to take any more?
We're not there yet. The stress on public services in the northern part of Brazil, especially the state of Roraima, which gets almost all of the migrants from Venezuela, is very intense. But we're handling it, and for the moment, this is a situation that we can control. We do hope that a change in the regime in Caracas will ease that migrant pressure, of course. We receive them with open arms. Brazilians are very solidary to them, but there's a pressure in terms of public services especially. So this is a situation that is under control now, but a big part of the solution, of course, would be the change of regime in Caracas.
Do you think, and I know the group was 20 members strong, I think, today, and there are voices from all over South America. Do you think at all, though, that the weight of the argument that Brazil is trying to make here is lessened by some of the comments made by your president towards almost expressing an admiration for the military dictatorship in the past? Do you think that, that's been a line of criticism, that has that lessened the impact of what your country is trying to say on Venezuela right now?
No, not at all. We are showing that the Brazilian government has a total commitment to promoting democracy. And in the past, the situation in Brazil was completely different. The military regime staged and organized a peaceful transition without any sort of stress like you're seeing in Venezuela. Is a total different situation. So I think we cannot compare in any way those situations.
I ask because those types of phrases, the way in which the president has spoken about the period of military dictatorship, you'll of course know there are lots of countries that are not on side with the Lima Group, let's say, or who are calling this a U.S. coup, a military coup, right? And a lot of them, at least here in Canada, have said, why would you side with someone like Brazil, whose president has said these things about military dictatorship? What would you say to them?
Yeah, what's important is our commitment now to work towards democracy. You can discuss everything that happened in Brazil from the early 60s to the mid 80s, and
not the events, just the words that the president. The president has said the armed forces are the guarantor of democracy.
Yes, and that can be the case in many ways, and has been the case maybe in some case in Brazil. It's a very different situation. Now we do hope that the armed forces in Venezuela might do their duty and support the interim government.
Do you think it's key? Do you think that the military support of Guaido is the key to that transition of power? Do you think it can happen without that?
It would be very difficult, so that's one thing that must be worked on. The Lima Group declaration calls upon the military to pledge allegiance to the interim government. So this is probably key to everything that can happen now, that we hope will happen.
All right, I appreciate your time today, Minister. Thank you very much for coming in.
Thank you very much.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Today's event in Ottawa marks the Lima Group's 10th ministerial meeting. Recent events in Venezuela, of course, have only added urgency to the group's work. The Lima Group was formed back in August of 2017 in Lima, Peru, and it's made up of representatives of 14 countries from the Western Hemisphere, including Canada, Mexico, Brazil, and Colombia. Mexico didn't attend Monday's meeting, but some other non-member countries did, including the US, France, Germany, and the UK. The group's sole purpose? Help resolve the crisis in Venezuela, a country of nearly 32 million people. On Monday's agenda, how to help ease the resulting refugee crisis in neighboring countries. More than 3 million Venezuelans have fled their country since 2015. And to find new ways, both financial and political, to support the Venezuelan opposition. 13 members of the group, everyone but Mexico, have said they do not recognize Nicolas Maduro as the legitimate leader of Venezuela. Sir Alan Duncan is the UK Minister for Europe and the Americas. He attended today's meetings and joins me now in studio. Hello, Minister. Great to see you. Thank you for coming in. I appreciate it. The UK isn't officially a member of the Lima Group. What compelled you to attend today? Why did you think it was important?
Well, we've taken a close interest in Venezuela for a long time, and we feel very strongly that this collapse of the country has been caused entirely by Maduro and his cronies. So we are allying ourselves very closely with the Lima Group. And a lot of European countries today have now recognized Juan Guaido as the interim president. So I hope that this collective international pressure can really make a difference and try and bring Venezuela back to a country which is free, which enjoys the rule of law, and which has proper democracy. How
realistic do you think it is that the pressure from groups like the Lima Group actually produce that difference?
Well, look, you never know, because this is politics. It's not a science where you can flick a switch and get a certain reaction. But we certainly do know that the only way you are going to get change is if there is this collective international action. And it is massive now. We've got the whole Lima Group, we've got a lot of European countries, we've got the United States, and that is the exterior pressure. But inside, there are now increasingly large demonstrations. The money has completely collapsed. I mean, the economy is destitute. I mean, inflation, measurable as 1,000,000%, you don't get that very often in the world. But that is the measure of what Maduro has done to destroy his country. He's stolen everything. He's stolen freedom, he's stolen money, he's stolen democracy, and he's defied the Constitution, which is why we think that Juan Guaido is the legitimate interim president, because he is working within the Constitution.
Yeah, you've used that sort of phrasing, similar phrasing for, you said today you're looking for a, quote, proper constitutional outcome. What does that mean?
That means free and fair elections, and that's what we want to see. And that's why Juan Guaido should be admired, because he hasn't sort of behaved in a way that anyone can say is a coup or something like that.
Though they are saying that. Some critics are.
Of course, I mean, the opponents will say it. I mean, so the supporters of Maduro say very, very silly and dangerous things. But what Juan Guaido said, he's the head of the National Assembly, which is legitimately elected, unlike the Constituent Assembly, which is the fake version created by Maduro to try and hold on to power. The Constitution says that you can do this if the president has broken the Constitution, which he has. So what he's saying is, I'm interim. What I want to see is elections, and we will honour the result of free and fair elections. That's a good thing.
We've talked a lot throughout the show this evening about the threat of military intervention, and I know there was a very specific outcome of the meeting today that talked about accomplishing what you've been speaking about without the use of military force. Do you think the threats coming from other parts of the world on military intervention are helpful or hurtful?
Well, I don't think they exist in quite the way you've described. I mean, you said threats from other parts of the world. Look,
specifically from the U.S.
Yeah, exactly. There's been some press speculation.
They're not a nothing country, though.
No, they are the biggest country, and it's in their backyard. But to say that this amounts to a threat as such, I think is an exaggeration. I mean, it is true that the U.S. are applying sanctions. They've held back from putting sanctions on oil for a long, long time, but it's quite clear now that any money from oil goes straight to the mafia at the top of the country. So we've got to stop the money going to all of those around Maduro to peel off the military and all his cronies. I don't think there's been any talk today about military intervention.
Not here.
No,
but yesterday Donald Trump said it.
I think you're exaggerating that as a threat. I really think that the course of action everybody wants to see is Maduro going to have free and fair elections and have to the return of democracy. Because one thing that we shouldn't forget is that if you have a return to democracy, you might also have the return of 3 million people who have fled from the country into neighbouring countries, because they, I think, could go back and help rebuild the democracy and the prosperity of the country pretty quickly if this dreadful man Maduro gets out of it.
So are we supposed to just dismiss what Donald Trump says when it comes to the military being involved and that option being available?
I think you're really picking at something here in an exaggerated way and overdoing it. It's not on the cards. We want the man to go out
with respect, it's the President of the United States, and he's said it not once, but twice, but 3 times, and Vice President Mike Pence said the same thing last week, too.
Well, we'll watch the space then, but in the meantime, I think that the most likely outcome is the effect of this continuing pressure will drive him out. There's no knowing how quickly, because these things sometimes take longer than you'd wish. But let's just remember, 3 million people have fled. Massive inflation. People haven't got the basics. There is terror, there's freedom, there's theft at the top of government in the most corrupt way. You cannot get a worse picture than this in a man-made national collapse.